Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rocio from SAGNY. Thank you all for joining us during your lunch hour. Today we have Seth from PPAI and Jessica from the Magnet Group joining us on this amazing presentation that they have for us. Jessica, I'm going to pass over the screen to you. And thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me, and Seth.
All right, yeah, thanks, Rocio. Before we get started, Jess and I just want to take the opportunity to give a little bit more detail about ourselves, but I'm going to introduce Jessica, and then she'll introduce me, and we'll get rolling. So I want to say that I'm proud to introduce my friend Jessica Hutwelker. Jess has spent 11 years in the industry as a distributor and is now in her 4th month of working for supplier, the Magnet Group. She serves as a regional sales manager for them. She's a passionate industry advocate. For those that have worked with her know that she's a passionate advocate in women's empowerment and specifically for this, in this regard, for millennial retention. She served PPAI on the Distributors Committee, the Government Relations Advisory Council, and the North American Leadership Conferences Work Group, and she's presently a promo kitchen chef and has some more information to share at the end about that. But I just want to thank her for connecting with me to do this, as we've gotten a chance to do this presentation a couple times now. So thank you, Jess. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Seth. It is such an honor to be here today to speak with all of you. Seth and I have known each other for several years. He's been with PPAI for the last 3 years, starting out as the Government Relations Manager, and he has a heart for leadership, community support, and advocating, as well as education. So for the last 3 years, he was helping out, advocating for our industry, educating distributors and suppliers alike about the importance of being involved in Washington, D.C. One of the priorities that PPAI and the board had identified was the shift in the generational workforce. And so it started out as a conversation last January with Seth. He developed a role to help with that gap that's being noticed by PPAI and pitched it to PPAI to address the millennials and what that means in helping our industry move forward and helping the business owners be attractive to the millennials and to keep them. So the role that he pitched to them, he ultimately ended up winning, and he kicked off this year doing that as the Diversity Development Manager. So we are so lucky to have Seth in our industry, and if there's 2 men at PPAI to know, he's one of them and the other is Paul Bellantone. So, you know, we're super, I mean, he's a rising star, and I'm so pleased and proud of everything that he's doing to help drive the industry forward. So Seth, take it away.
Excellent. So I want to give everybody a little bit of a disclaimer going forward here, and that's that this information is really being provided to help you update your way of thinking. And you may actually get to the end of this and determine, well, we really are at a good place, we attract and engage millennials really well, or we are a diverse culture within our workforce, but you've really got to think about it in a way to say, I really want to update or challenge where we are right now. And that's not to discourage anyone that's already in your organization. This is not exclusively about just attracting, engaging, and retaining millennials. It's really about shaping your culture so that you're able to maintain this great work environment that's conducive to all these different generations together. And so really think about it as we move through here as just a challenge to say, I just need to potentially update little things, little processes. Don't totally throw out the rule book, because everything that you're doing is you're doing things well. If you're a business in this industry, you are a unique entity as far as the business world is concerned, and that's great. We need to embrace and harness that and ensure that that's maintained, but we also need to start to challenge our way of thinking so that we're able to get in more young leaders and put the young leaders that are already in our industry up to the challenge to take on some new roles and some new opportunities. So just keep that in mind as we move about this, and I think that's really going to help you understand the framework of how everything is put together right now. So again, this is a way of looking at this to say it's not necessarily about saying I'm gonna totally change everything that I'm doing. I'm gonna totally throw out everything that I've got going on as far as what's maintaining in my business, but just to say I'm gonna update or challenge myself to update my way of thinking. And this quote here, it's good for your food prep workers to be creative, but you don't want them changing the recipes. So if you've got a millennial workforce already in place, that's great. Tap into them for some of these new ideas, for ways to advance your business. But you're not necessarily going them to say, what can I totally do differently? What can we completely change? It's just about carefully updating through some of their unique the unique opportunities that they may want to be included in your business, or they may want to challenge you to look at. And then eventually you'll get to a place where you move these people into more of a leadership role and they're able to help in a bigger capacity. But again, it's just about allowing that creativity to come out a little bit, but not completely throwing everything out.
So who is the millennial? According to lots of studies, there's been a big range in terms of the years, but we've settled in on 1982 to 2000. And currently, 65% of those millennials are in the workforce, but within 10 years, it's going to become 75%. And that's here to stay for the next 30 plus years. So it's not just that millennials are here or coming in, is that they are going to be the buyers, the managers, the leaders, the customers. So it's so important to really hone into the understanding of how they think, how they want to contribute and drive everything forward, their own lives, the companies, the industry as a whole forward. And if you see there, it mentions that while 65% say compensation is important, 80% say their work environment is even more important than that. Why is that? They're recognizing that you spend most of your day at the office or in your job. And for millennials, it's not necessarily a 9-to-5 job. They are always connected in some way, as I'm sure many of us have seen as we've moved over to smart devices, so we're online and connected all of the time. So they're really understanding that it's not so much segmented or compartmentalization of your day. It's more of integration of everything weaving in and out. So it's so important to have that kind of flexibility in your workforce at your company, understanding that they will get the work done. And it says that 66% will switch careers in their lifetime. And, why is that? Well, there isn't a safety net anymore that there was a couple generations ago. You don't walk into a company now and sign up and know that you'll be there for 30 years and have a pension waiting for you. There is no safety net anymore. And then they've also watched their parents. I've watched my father, gave 25 plus years at a company and was let go. So, they're recognizing that it's not enough just to stay somewhere. There's no guarantee in life or in their careers. So if they want to grow and expand, they're going to have to make changes. So that's just understanding the mindset of where they came from and where they're going to.
All right, so before I mentioned, we're really needing to look at all generations that are present in the marketplace. And this is some research that came out in the late 90s, and these two economists went and looked at this idea of the fourth turning. And so what they did is they actually went back throughout history. They went back actually 500 years and looked at different generations and how different generations within one market interact with one another. And while we've only identified generations since the turn of the 20th century, they went back and just looked at different events throughout history that changed the market, that changed the way that a certain generation interacts with another. And what was really interesting about this is they found that there are really 4 main generations in a marketplace at the same time. And the reason I mention this is because it shows that we can learn from the generations that have come before us. So I'll give you an idea of this. So at the turn of the 20th century, we had the GI generation. They were a generation that was brought up with exorbitant technology boom, financial boom, all of these things, everything that was supporting especially this country, but the rest of the world as well. Everything that was pushing and driving was technology and was financially lucrative, and all of these things turned that turn of the century made it really, really an impressive time throughout the last several hundred years. But the interesting part of that is at the end of that, specifically at the end of that generation, that's whenever things started to unravel a little bit. It's whenever this nation specifically, took a little bit of a downturn and started heading towards the Great Depression, started heading into war, and all of these things that kind of turned into turmoil. So the era type of the GI generation is an unraveling era. And so what that means is that they ended up being a civic generation, because they dealt with all this prosperity at the front end to just see everything sort of fall apart. They turned into this civic group. And a lot of the civic organizations that are around in this country today were created by that generation. They wanted to give back to the future generations to ensure that there would be nothing but prosperity into the future. And then the next generation after that's the silent generation. Now, they knew nothing but war. So World War I, World War II, they were a generation of crisis, and in that they had to become adaptive. So then after that, you've got the baby boomers. Now, you think about what the world that the baby boomer grew up in, post-World War II, everything was about maintaining prosperity, about creating, establishing your mark and creating your own opportunity. And so they became the idealists. And then you've got Generation X that came from the idealists that became more of a reactive generation. They're the ones that sort of challenged the way of thinking of their previous generation. And that's where you see a lot of things like the newest technology booms. You see things like the computer becoming much more mainstream, and all of the things that changed throughout the 70s and 80s that brought us into the era that we are now was on the back of Generation X. So then, at the end of that, you look at Generation Y, or the Millennials. Now, if you look back to the beginning of the 20th century and then compare that to this group, the Millennials today, very, very similar things were going on. You had a huge technology boom, a lot of prosperity, a lot of wealth in the economy, only to see it completely unravel and fall apart, and ending at the end of that point, you've got all this turmoil and all this chaos that gets created around it. So again, they become the group that's a very unraveled group, and the millennial is a civic group. And you'll see throughout some of this research in this presentation, you'll see that again and again. Millennials talk about being civically engaged. They are a civic group. They want to give back to the community. They want to put programs or be involved in programs in the community that ensure that future generations are profitable, have nothing but prosperity. And so if you look back at that, that's where the fourth turning comes in. It means that all four of those generations that built to that certain point are seen time and again. And if this study actually looks back, like I said, over the last 500 years, that happened constantly over the last 500 years, where there's four generations, and you can mark each generation by a certain event, and it changed who they were. It gave them that sort of adaptability to be their own generation. And so it's just interesting to think about, we're looking now at this millennial generation saying, how can we challenge ourselves to advance so that we are able to attract and engage millennials? But the truth is, there's a lot of information that's already out there about what we can expect. And one of the things that we want to try to do, especially as PPAI looks at diversity development, is the ways that we can continue to seek out answers for those generations coming ahead. So Generation Z is the next one that's going to come into the market, that's already in the market in some regard, and then they'll have a significant place in the market over the next 10 and 15 years. And we've already got the answers to that because they're a generation of crisis and they're an adaptive generation, and we know what solutions are out there that we can implement. So it's just something good to consider, to think about. We're not talking about anything new. We're simply updating to the times about some information that we already have, and you'll see that as we move along throughout the presentation.
So fantastic, Seth, is really that history does repeat itself. Okay, so the great divide, the workplace perceptions that millennials need to rise above. And on the left-hand side, it mentions how millennials would describe themselves, and then in contrast, how HR professionals would use to describe millennials. And as you can see, there's a bit of a disconnect between how millennials view themselves and how the professionals view them. Two of the key pieces that jump out for me, and Seth, you can certainly hop in, the tech savvy. HR professionals see millennials as extremely tech savvy, and I would say that we're more resourceful. As you can see, that millennials only see themselves as tech savvy for 35% of them. Yes, we know how to work our way around a phone and everything like that, but in my mind, we're more resourceful in that if we need to find out how something works or get an answer, we'll look it up, we'll seek out the appropriate person. If we don't know it, we understand that the knowledge is at our fingertips, but it's not exactly innate. Seth, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that it does show that this is a very shocking thing, and especially whenever it comes to being tech savvy. And it's the difference of the previous generations really having to learn technology and to develop the skills from nothing to being able to advance themselves enough to use technology in such a way, whereas the millennials, especially you look at the latter part of the millennial group, the more recent millennials, they grew up in a world where there was nothing but technology. There was always technology present. And I mean, I was very young and in elementary school the first time I ever saw a computer, but that didn't necessarily mean I had to learn how it worked. I just had to figure out how to utilize it. And it's funny, Jess and I were talking the other day, and we were saying, if we have a technology problem, we turn to Google, whereas people in other generations, if they have a technology problem, they try to figure out what that technology problem is through trial and error, different approaches that as part of them being what we would consider more tech savvy. I think the millennials are very tech familiar, but just not necessarily tech savvy in the sense of this term.
Totally agreed. And another key one that really stands out, there's obviously two more, but one is hardworking. Millennials do see themselves as hardworking, whereas HR professional doesn't. Only 11% see them that way. And we kind of sit back and reflect on that. And I have a great example. One of my former colleagues, she is the fastest pricing person I've ever seen in my life on the distributor side. And she would just get things done, and then she'd be waiting for more work to be done. So I think that millennials are incredibly efficient in a lot of ways. They want to streamline processes and come up with shortcuts. We grew up in this generation of finding faster, better ways to do things and finding the shortcuts to get the job done and in the best way possible. So I don't think millennials shy away from hard work at all. Seth and I both know how much we ourselves work in our roles and contribute to the company and the industry. So, I think that there's a misperception about that, if you're on your phone, you're not working. Well, you might be texting a client or communicating online with a possible opportunity. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. But yeah, Seth, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think you hit it very well, and the two things that stand out the most to me are the hardworking and loyal. And I think that I understand on either an older generation side or HR professional, I understand why those would be not at the top, because the idea of hardworking and loyal has shifted a little bit. We've got, but it's it's because of certain factors that are out there. The hardworking piece, again, it's that perception versus reality that Jessica talked about. If a young person's on their phone, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not working hard. They still could be working. It's just how they're tapping into the technology that they know. And then on the loyal to employer side, again, there's no safety net out there. There's choice. And so the loyalty to employer comes in a very different sort of package. But that doesn't mean that they're not loyal. It just means that there are certain characteristics inside that organization that need to be met, such as developing a culture that is conducive to a younger professional to get them to be loyal. I can definitely speak to this, as I've had several different jobs or several different careers that I've gone into, and it's the organization itself that I didn't enjoy working in that particular environment. I may have enjoyed the career itself, but it's that sort of working environment or that culture that was present that I didn't immediately enjoy. And so I worked to find a place where I would want to be just as loyal to them as they were to me.
Right, and trust obviously is of utmost importance, and loyalty does go both ways. If you have to cut costs back and let go of staff, who is usually the ones to get let go first? It's probably the newer people and the younger generation. So, there's this sense of, obviously getting the best of what I can wherever I go, but also understanding of your staff who wants to grow. They want to be challenged while also being supported. And contribute and drive your company forward. So, I think that there is definitely a loyalty. Seth and I can both speak to that, that we millennials care and we're loyal and we are hardworking. We want to help make everything better, including ourselves. We want to better ourselves. So this next slide, it says the message is clear. When looking at their career goals, today's millennials are just as interested in how a business develops its people and its contribution to society as they are in its products and profits. So thinking about from a millennial standpoint, where am I going? What is my career path? And more importantly, where do you see me as a business owner? Where do you see me moving down the line? They have to know that 2 years from now, I'm going to be doing something different from what I'm doing right now, because they want to drive forward and they understand that innovation happens so fast and they want to grow with that trend within themselves and their development. So, what opportunities are out there? Is there a possibility of creating my own role? Seth ended up doing that himself. He saw a need and how to drive PPAI forward and address one of their key objectives and better his own professional career as well, and something that he was very passionate about. So it was a role that didn't exist 3 years ago, but here it is now. So as a business owner, really letting your employees know that just because there isn't something now doesn't mean there won't be a position down the road. So let us know your passions and your gifts and your talents and what you really love that will help our company succeed and excel. It says these findings should be viewed as a valuable alarm to the business community, particularly in developed markets, that they need to change the way they engage millennial talent or risk being left behind. And to the point about the contribution to society is that we're beyond profits. What are you doing as a company to make the community, the country, and the world better? There's a very serious sense of the state of the world and the communities, and what are we doing as a company to help make it a better place? What are we doing as individuals, and how are you supporting that? So engagement within the communities and volunteering, you'll see on the next slide, is very important. Seth, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's right, and I just want to again point to the fact that it does consistently go back to that idea of culture, and then the different nuances of culture, like civic opportunities, and those are very small things. It's not, and you'll see on the next slide we'll get to talking a little bit about compensation, but again, all the things that we're covering, we don't really touch on compensation that much because that's not the most critical element for the younger generation. If you're providing these unique characteristics to your organization, that sets you apart from someone else immediately, regardless if you are not able to compensate them as well. So we'll get into that, and their compensation is definitely up there, but it's never, with this group, it's never going to be the top. It's never going to be how much money am I going to make. That'll never be the first question, which is a really beneficial thing to this generation.
Yes, so on this slide it says the purpose of business is to, and this was based on about 5,000 respondents to this question. So I'm not sure if you can read the screen, but in case you can't, the number one, or the largest percentage was improve society. It's number one purpose for several different countries, including the US. At 35% it was to generate profit, and at 33% it was to drive innovation. So what does that tell us from a millennial standpoint is that it's not just profit, it's people, profit, planet. It's like, how can we develop as a people, as a company, as a planet? And I think that one of the driving messages is, I want to stay, I want to be here, and I want to better myself in the company that I'm with. So it's, again, like Seth said, you look at all the other pieces that, creating wealth was 15%. So it's about driving everything forward, as you can see. So to capitalize on millennials, utilize their enthusiasm and their zest to help make your company be better. They want to make you at the top of your league, at the top of your game. So definitely tap into that rather than discouraging them or saying not yet. Give them opportunities to really help drive your company forward. Seth, what would you like to add to that?
Well, one of the things that stands out to me about this, and this is research that's done outside of PPAI, outside of the industry, but looking down the line here, improve society, generate profit, drive innovation, and produce goods and services, as well as the others. But those specifically stand out to me as this industry. I just think that it's so impressive that we naturally or organically are able to provide these things as part of this industry. Improving society can mean your organization being involved civically, but it can also look at how many products are out there that provide support to nonprofit groups or civic groups or charitable organizations, because we're that cost-effective entity. So we're able to provide that. We're able to improve society through the use of product, which I think that piece, the improved society piece, speaks both ways. Generate profit, obviously there is a tremendous opportunity to generate profit within this industry on multiple levels. Drive innovation, this is one of those things that if you take the opportunity to walk around the expo show floor and look at how many people bring product to this market, how many different and interesting and fun products or new patents are brought into this market, because they can maximize the amount of people that are going to see this product, whatever it may be. I mean, if you walk around there, you think, wow, from spectrum to spectrum, there is everything on that show floor, and so many people that are bringing product to market. So that drive innovation piece is there, and especially for the younger people that want to be involved in this, there's definitely that opportunity to plug them into the drive innovation piece. And then obviously producing goods and services, I mean, that's what we're doing. We're not only producing goods, but we're providing a service. We all act as marketers within this industry, and that's providing that service. So you're not just a producer of goods, and you're not just a producer of service. You're both of those things, which is actually really hard to find as far as the workforce is concerned. So again, we provide so much of this organically within this industry.
And even within PPAI and the associations and the regionals, there's so many different ways to contribute. So even if your company as a business owner, maybe you don't have the tools or the availability to really dive into any kind of volunteerism or community service, there's so many facets of that are available. at PPAI and different organizations. So there's a lot of different ways to encourage community impact. I can't think of a more generous, more giving, more involved community truly than our industry.
All right, so we want to look at what millennials want at work, and this is information that came from industry millennials. So the millennials that are within this industry that are saying, here's what my ideal situation is from my boss, from my company, and what I want to learn. So specifically on what they want from their boss. The first one is help to navigate career path, which again we've seen before in this presentation. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are helping them navigate a career path away from this career. You're helping them understand what else there is other than their job right then. Because like Jessica said, after a couple of years, they're not going to want to stick in the same exact role. Now, they could have the same title, but new opportunities, or you've created some way to get them involved in the company, whatever it may be. That's part of navigating their career path. Where am I going to be in a couple of years from now? What are my next steps that I'm going to be able to take? And whatever that may be, there are so many different areas of conversation to have around that. But again, if you've got those millennials already working for you, tap into that and ask them what they think of as their ideal career path. The next one is give straightforward feedback often. And I put often on there because there's never enough feedback, it seems like, for the younger generation. They do want constant feedback, as opposed to other generations that you may have other generations working for you that they're working on a task. They don't want to be checked on a lot. They don't want a ton of feedback. They just want to know, yep, this is right, or no, it's not, and here's why. Millennials a little bit different. Remember, this is a generation that came from a group of parents that asked them every day when they got home from school, what did you do today? And not just did you have a good day, but what did you do? What did you learn? What did you talk about? That's that feedback. That ability to accept that feedback is a huge benefit to the millennial generation, but you've got to be able to provide it. If you think you're giving too much feedback, I guarantee you're not. Whether it be on a specific task or challenge, or whether it be something that's much bigger and it's ongoing, provide that feedback. It doesn't have to be lengthy, but just provide that straight feedback often. The next thing is mentor and coach. And there are so many opportunities for people to plug in this industry and find a mentor or a coach. But I want to encourage, if you're the supervisor of a millennial, or you will be someday, take that opportunity to mentor and coach. Whatever that may look like to you, there are so many different ways, especially in this industry, that we can mentor and coach people. But figure out what way you would want to be mentored to at that age and help them mentor. And again, that's all part of navigating that career path. Support participation in development programs. All this is saying is to support their participation. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to pay for it. It's not, hey, there's this training event going on that costs $300, I'd love to go to it. They're not asking for the $300 part. They're saying they want your support in continuing their development. So they want your okay to say, yeah, absolutely, go out and do that, because you know that you're going to gain from that information they're getting. You are going to have not only a more content, more satisfied employee, but then whatever information they gain is also for your benefit. So again, just support that idea of that participation. And then the final one is something we're all very familiar with in this industry, is non-traditional work schedules. And that's becoming more of a trend across any industry. There are a lot of non-traditional work schedules that go on, and that's just kind of the way that things need to be. There's life and everything moves so much faster these days. And sometimes we don't have the opportunity to do the things we need to just on the weekends, or just after the hours of our 8 and 5 schedule. Many of you probably hold non-traditional work schedules, and that's good. Just know that that needs to be open. That doesn't necessarily have to mean that the person has to be gone out of the office for 2 or 3 hours a day, or it's very random. It can be somewhat structured, but still for the most part, non-traditional. And I think about this in my situation. I work on a somewhat non-traditional work schedule just because of my commute times. So because I work at quite a distance from my office, my schedule differs a little bit from other people in my organization. But at the same time, my boss and my organization are fine with that because they know that that's what is necessary for me to stick around here. So Jess, you want to talk about company?
Sure. So everything on this page really speaks so strongly to me. I was on the distributor side for 11 years, and 10 of them was with a fantastic company. And I really, really wanted to grow, and the route I wanted to take wasn't available to me. But I found a company that had all of those things that that I was really looking for, and I left everything I had behind to pursue it. I moved across the country. I left everything that I had. Loaded up my car and drove across, and because I was in such a pursuit of growth, so understanding that people will, if you're willing to move mountains, they will come to be a part of it. I wanted so much to have a coach and a mentor to help guide me and teach me. I had 10 years under my belt, and I wanted to grow and be a better asset, a greater asset to a company. So this all speaks so heavily to, I think, a lot of us. It does take more effort. It's not just, hiring someone and putting them at their desk and assuming that they're going to just figure it out and do their job. Because to Seth's point, they're just so used to engagement with their parents and their peers and their mentors and their teachers and everything like that. So it would lead up to, looking for that adult coach to really help them through to the next step of their careers and their lives. There's a great case study. This young woman was a former prospect of mine at Subaru. Her name is Amelia, and she's in her mid-20s. And I was just so blown away by Amelia's point of view, because we've heard about how millennials stay for about a year. Studies show like 1.1-ish years before they move on, and here is Amelia saying, I love where I am, and I'm here to stay. I want this to become a career. I want to spend my career here at Subaru, and I was so surprised by that. And and I asked her, what is it about that? And it came down to a few key things. One was, even though it's a large company, it was very family-oriented. There was an open-door policy. People were incredibly kind. They stopped what they were doing to talk to each other and to her, and her voice and opinion mattered. She started out as an intern, and within a year she had been hired, and within a year of that she had been promoted. So, to be promoted, every year to year and a half into different roles, not necessarily a progressive role, but maybe just a different position within the company, made her feel that she mattered and that she was valued, and that her contribution could grow as well as her skill set. So, to me, it was just, gosh, she was just like a poster child of, what millennials are willing to contribute. If there is opportunity to move up and move through and grow and feel appreciated and valued, they will stay. They will stay. Seth, what do you think?
Okay, so just to tack onto that point a little bit, I think that part of the issue with the retention factors, and especially what we look at as retention, is, and not only in that, but a lot of these characteristics, it's sort of easy to focus on the negative. So yes, there is, after that, like the studies show, like Jessica talked about, after that 1-ish years, they're going to want to say, okay, let's reset. Do I like where I am? Do I want to continue another year? So that's really, during that first year, it's not only about their growth and progression, but it's about being able to show that you're willing to contribute to that. So it's, again, it goes back to what can you do to make yourself a a better employer for them specifically while not alienating anyone else. So again, it goes back to really a personal connection and those personal relationships that you form with that person individually. So on this one, we're talking about what makes an organization an attractive employer. And again, this goes back to a poll that we did with specifically millennials in this industry. And again, it kind of aligns with the things that we've been talking about already. The very top one, opportunity for career progression, by far the top. And that has come up again and again. And it's not, again, it's not necessarily career progression in a different direction. It's their career progression. Where am I going within this industry? And the case study that Jessica just talked about, Amelia was able to see, where am I going? What does my future look like here? I know the steps that are in front of me. I know the challenges that are set out, and I know how to tackle each of those to move myself forward. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean from going from one step up the ladder to the next or from raise to raise. It may mean some moving sideways a little bit, going to different departments, learning some new skills, but it's that whole idea of career progression, just understanding that they need that opportunity for career progression. And then the second one here is compensation and financial benefit. Obviously, that's an important factor, but again, it's not the very top factor. It's just something that must be considered. But let me say that if it comes down to, let's say that there's two companies that a millennial may be seeking out, and if one's able to provide more financial benefit, but the other one is extremely engaged in civic activity or has an obviously good cultural dynamic set up, they're going to place more value on that culture and on that presence that company has over the value of the actual dollar. And that's because they want to see the long-term progression. They want to know, I'm going to be with this organization for the long run, instead of I'm going to be here and I may be miserable, but I'm making a decent amount of money. It's really more about being involved, having that career advancement, doing all of those things that one company can provide over financial compensation. And then some of the other things to consider on here are companies that have a reputation for ethical practices, again, flexible work schedules, which this industry naturally provides, but just keep that in mind. Corporate values that match their own, very, very important, and training and development. I mean, all of these different things align with the possibilities that's out there already. And I think specifically whenever it comes to being ethical and having ethical practices and doing those things that can be relatable, I think Jessica can speak a little bit to that. But just on my end of things, I see it as so many organizations are taking it upon themselves in this industry to ensure that there are ethical practices going on throughout our entire supply chain, to ensure that they have good corporate values, that the corporate values align with everyone else in the industry, to ensure that our industry not only progresses one individual at a time, but as a whole. So do you have anything you want to add to that?
I do. I think that everything Seth said was absolutely spot on, and I can speak that, people, there's a saying that people will do business with people that they like. Well, I think, too, that people will stay at companies because of the people. A lot of times people will join a company but leave the manager. That's kind of the relationship between the manager and the employee is of paramount importance, to have the coach and to have the mentor. But beyond that, coming up with ways to really encourage cross-department interaction. A couple of initiatives that I introduced at the last company I was with was lunch together on Wednesdays, and just inviting everyone in the company just to come together into the conference room for an hour on Wednesdays, and from all over the enterprise, because a lot of times we can get very stuck into our individual teams or our roles or departments, and that doesn't help with building culture. So if you aren't able to do something like outings or team building exercises, and maybe you don't have the resources to do that, it's very easy to just create an open environment and a welcoming one where every week at this time people across the company can get together, and I definitely encourage to also incorporate maybe even once a month having executive leadership in there as well, so that they can really tap into each other and have an open dialogue and get to know one another. That's just so important. Another thing too that I found that I introduced that was really helpful at the company was spot recognition. There's so many times where it's just expected to do your job, but a lot of us care so much and will go above and beyond. And it's important for the sales staff to recognize the accounting people, to recognize the production, to recognize the product safety and the vendor relations, and there's opportunities to do that and really kind of create this cohesion and this generative energy that I appreciate what you do, I couldn't be here without you, and let's work together as a team. So it's these little things that can be done. You don't have to do seismic shifts like Seth and I had mentioned earlier. You can do little things that really make a lasting impact and create a deeper sense of camaraderie and sense of community within your own business. So just keep in mind that we want to grow, we want to be better, and what are my resources? Where can I go to tap in? Again, PPAI, you can go in to get certifications, and there's so many webinars and educational tools, and Promo Kitchen, which I'll mention at the end too, is very innovative and creative and involves so many industry leaders. So there's definitely different ways that you can provide to your employees to encourage them to develop their skills and their understanding of the industry and how to help drive it forward, rather than just showing up and doing your job and leaving. Allowing them and encouraging them to keep developing is so critical. And that's what I have to say about that, Seth.
All right, there you go. I like it. Okay, so real quick, I just want to touch on a couple of points that where this came from in this kind of natural progression of getting to this diversity development point, at least for this association. And back last year, again, like Jessica said in the beginning, we started having this conversation at Expo 2015 and did some things, reached out to some people and really saw that there was a need out there, but I thought I really want to go out and hear from future leaders just about what they see as their opportunities coming in. And I think one of the biggest problems that there is out there is that perception versus reality. It's the perception that people have about the millennial generation and about the millennial workforce. And I think one of the most critical elements to what Jessica and I are trying to do and what we're trying to do at PPAI is to eliminate some of those negative things that are out there in the marketplace. And so one of the things that I did is I went to a university and went into a young leadership class. So these were freshman and sophomore students, and asked them, what if you had to tell your future boss or your future employer something about yourself today, what would it be? And these are some of the responses that came out. And just if you want to go to the next slide. And this shows, kind of breaks that down a little bit more. It's basically looks at how the millennial describes themselves, so how those individuals describe themselves. So things like, I need to be continually challenged. I don't want to be famous, but I want to be remembered for what I do. And then in contrast, there's how society traditionally describes millennials. So whenever it comes to they need to be continually challenged, well, that's kind of a contrast to looking at millennials are impatient. Well, they're not necessarily impatient, but they do want that continual challenge. They don't want to have downtime. They want to continue to work hard, continue to have opportunities for advancement. And that does come across as impatient, but that's not a bad thing. That can be harnessed. And then the part that is, I don't want to be famous, but I want to be remembered for what I do. And then on contrast to that, they only want fame and fortune. That's definitely not this generation. They want to leave their mark, absolutely. They want to be involved in an organization where they can leave their stamp and say, I did that, or I accomplished that, or I set an example for others because of a certain thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean fame and fortune. That just means creating some sort of mark, which there is that opportunity to do. But again, it's about working with those millennials to understand what they want as part of their career progression. So the next one on here is millennials are impossible to work with. And I can't tell you how many times I've actually heard that from people that say, I just can't figure it out. I can't work with them. And you've really got to take a step back and understand where they're coming from. It's that mentality of an entrepreneur. And I've told people that there's so much of that entrepreneurial spirit that's alive in the younger generation and in this next group that's coming out of college right now. There's so much entrepreneurial drive, which is great, and it's great that we can harness that in this industry. There's opportunities to have that entrepreneurial spirit tapped into in the industry. And again, it's just about trying to figure out ways to help them develop that, to help them maintain that. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're giving them the tools to go do things on their own. I think that that's such a common misunderstanding, especially in this industry, because we've seen it so much. We've seen how, well, we teach this person so much about being a distributor, and then they go off, and then all of a sudden they're your competitor. That's not necessarily this next generation. If you're able to harness that entrepreneurial spirit in the current work environment that they're in, then they will be continually challenged to stick around to help your organization grow instead of branching off on their own and sort of taking a nearly impossible feat. And so that's definitely something to consider. And then the final one on here is that millennials have no vision. And one of the things that stood out to me with this this project that I did in front of these college freshmen and sophomores was, one of them said, my success is seen through my company's growth. So they're measuring, their benchmark is if their company grows. And I know that Jessica can agree with this, and I certainly can agree with this. If on my end of things, if our association does well and we provide all that we can for this industry, that success is a piece of everyone's here, regardless of what they do in this building. That success is everybody's. And so my success certainly is seen through the association's growth and the association's involvement. So Jess, you have anything else on that?
No, I love this slide, and I think that it's fantastic. And when Seth and I spoke at Expo this year about millennials, you know, just it was amazing. We passed out these index cards, and we asked the millennials in the group to write on one side what they would like their manager to know, and then on the other side, what can be done right now to keep me engaged in my role. And overwhelmingly, the responses were, you know, we want to help, we want to grow, we want to be a part of something, and we want to have a good relationship with our manager, trust us, give me an opportunity, you know. It was, I mean, I was so blown away by the level of commitment and drive and desire, such a passion to be the best. You know, they want to excel. They don't want to have just a job. They want it to be something that matters. Are we ready for the next slide, Seth?
I think so.
All right, cool. So I wanted to make sure that we have time for questions. So I'm not going to read all of these out to you, but definitely take a look at the presentation afterwards or listen to this again. What I feel that these questions really boil down to for principals are transparency, integrity, trust, collaboration, growth, innovation, and initiative. So really staying involved and being true to your word. Trust is so important to millennials. Transparency. You know, we've grown up with, you know, finding out about Enron and Goldman Sachs and things crashing and things not being what they appear. So, you know, just be upfront, be honest, share with us as much as you can so that we can help, we can be a part of something and drive it forward. So those are kind of the key component words that I pulled through this. Seth, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that it's this is certainly the beginning step. I think all this information that's covered here, all that I'll share some resources with you here in a bit, but all of this is a very step one. Don't consider yourself left behind at this point. And you may look over this and say, wow, we're at a really good place. We do a great job. That's great. Harness that and share that with your peer groups. Figure out ways that you can better challenge others to get involved in attracting, engaging, and retaining millennials, but then also creating that sense of culture throughout your entire organization. And so no matter where you are in this, just know that everyone is sort of taking this step together at this time. And it's something that obviously with PPAI just now getting involved in this, it means that it's not too late. It means that we're not playing catch up on this. We are at a really good spot to have this conversation right now and take this very first step. But I just challenge everyone and encourage everyone to go back and look at your organization and look at your staff and figure out opportunities to get new people in, to get younger leaders in, and what those leadership roles look like. And once you figure that out, then you can create some actionable steps to get there in the near future. But again, it's not too late. So start having those conversations now. But don't look at it as it's something, oh my gosh, we have to get done right now, and we're missing the boat on this. There are definitely organizations in this industry that do things really, really well whenever it comes to attracting, engaging, and retaining anyone, and those that don't do it as well. But the thing is we're going to figure out ways to connect all of those bridges so that everybody's taking these steps together.
Yes, as an industry. But it is important to make progress because, again, from that innovation standpoint, we want to move forward and keep that amazing talent that's coming out of the colleges that you have under your roof right now. You have a better brain share and brain capital under your roof than anywhere else. Tap into the millennials that you have right now because they understand the buyers, they understand the market, they understand what matters. So really harness that that knowledge that you already have available to you to help move your practices forward. So and Seth has the presentation, so does Rocio. So after you look at those you know, the statements before, here's just kind of what holds true and what doesn't, and what steps you can take to help drive your company forward. So in the essence of time, I want to make sure that we can answer questions and everything like that. But, you know, Seth, if you want to, you know, jump on this part and we can go forward.
Okay, well, and again, well, I'll put this up, put this information up so on the website, and then we'll ensure that we send it out to everyone so that you are able to look at those actionable items. But all of this is just, it's something to consider. All of these are considerations to make right now. It's not necessarily saying these are the 1, 2, 3 things you need to do today. But start having these conversations. We really want to encourage you to have the conversations within the industry, within your peer groups, within your organization, to your staff members, regardless of what sort of staff you have, whether it's a huge staff or a tiny staff. Have these conversations and just see what sort of feedback you get. This is not a tailor-made scenario. This is not specific to any one organization or another. It's just these are sort of the templates that you can use to drive yourself forward.
So let's share with them about our resources, Seth.
Absolutely. You want to go to the next? So PPAI.org/diversity, there are 3 different sections on that specific page. One is about this topic, about engaging and retaining millennials. The next one is about selling to a millennial market and what the millennial buyers look like. And the third one is for the millennials that are in the industry and what ways they can do, what things they can tap into on a PPAI side or the resources that we have to get them to advance to the next level within their career. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. And then everything that we do, everything that's produced on our end of things or through, if I do anything through Promo Kitchen or through any of these external organizations from PPAI, is all throughout social media with using hashtag PPAI NextGen. So go out, seek that out, use those resources. They're there for the industry. They're there for the benefit of the industry. They can be used and reused by anyone. So please take a look at that. And then if at any point you've got questions, concerns, reach out to me. This is what I'm here for now. I want to have these conversations with people. I want to get the conversation moving. And if there's something that needs to be, that you need a little bit more specific information on, or something that you think we want to be looking into as an industry, let me know. We are such at a first step in this that we really need to develop all of these different elements using what is necessary. What are the necessary next steps to take? So feel free to connect with me.
Yeah, and also on that website, Brittany David, who's the VP of Sales with Snogden, is also one of the members of the board for PPAI. She did a couple of really fantastic videos, one addressing the business owners and what you can do to engage and attract millennials, and then one to the millennials and what you can do to step up as a millennial. So these are really, they're quick, they're fantastic, they're engaging. She's awesome at that. And I did want to mention, as promokitchen.org, it is it's an industry independent 501c3 nonprofit that is about education and mentorship. We have so many blogs and podcasts with industry leaders, people outside of the industry. Seth Godin, who's a marketing guru, Seth Barnett himself, he and I did a podcast last year together. There's so many different resources there available. So again, if it's not something that necessarily you can do within your company, there's so many resources out there for your employees to develop and engage and encourage growth. So I think that wraps that up for us. Rocio, we're certainly available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Seth, for that insightful presentation. I have a couple here, two people here who have asked a question. Racy Blewett wants to know, what age are you defining millennials?
So like we said in the beginning, any type of research that you look at may say something different for millennials. Any research that we put out as PPAI or anything that we've talked about today, we're looking at the 1982 to 2000 age group. So anyone that's born between 1982 and 2000 are who we're looking at as Gen Y or the millennial. There are different types of research go a little bit further back or a little bit further forward, but I actually had a meeting with a group of economists back whenever we were starting to develop this program, and that was kind of the consensus that we all came to, because we were looking at what defined each generation and what point each generation sort of breaks apart from another, and that's where we got that window from. So for all the purposes of the research that you see from PPAI, it's 1982 to 2000.
Thank you, Seth. I have Mary Beach here, who says, I think it's more of a statement, not a question. She said, it seems millennials have difficulties in communicating face-to-face since they are so adept at technology. I find many of them are not confident in writing or speaking proper English. So I don't know if you guys want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll take it first, Jessica, and then you can jump in. I think I actually had a conversation with somebody who's a coach, a talent coach, and they teach people about public speaking and all these different things. And we had that very conversation about how, because there's so much disengagement from the millennial group, that so many of them are not able to communicate properly, especially because there's a different way in which we communicate through text and email than how we communicate, obviously, in traditional writing or in person. And I think that there's definitely a lot to be said for that, because that does go on, that there are those millennials out there. And if that's the case, if you're running across that, provide opportunity for them to get that education that they need, or figure out ways to advance themselves in that area. I think I see so many that do it right, and that write well, and that speak, especially publicly speak well, that I focus so strongly on them, so I don't see as many of that side of the of the generation that looks like they're not able to communicate, especially in person as well. And I think that it's just about getting them to the level where they feel confident and getting them properly trained. And there's so many different opportunities to get involved and become, especially whenever it comes to public speaking and writing. So encourage, if you've got staff members who are not totally keyed up on that level of communication, get them that help that they need to get to that certain level, and then encourage face-to-face communication. I think it's easy, especially in this business, to do so much over the phone that that person never gets the opportunity to learn about what the face-to-face communication looks like. And I've found that the more you have the opportunity for face-to-face communication, the better you are on the phone, because you use that same type of skill set as you do in person over the phone, and it just helps them a lot. So just encourage them to, again, it's about feedback. If that's part of the feedback you need to give that feedback, but then encourage them to seek out ways to advance themselves.
Okay. And what I would add to that, Rocio, is that, there's ways you can do that within your company now. Like, you can create like teams, like people from different departments maybe that are formed as a team, and you give them a monthly objective, like, hey, on January or June coming up, we're going to do a presentation about X, and we want you to do it in front of the company. So giving them opportunities, that role playing, I think that's so key. That, again, like to Seth's point, they're just, it's rusty to them. They're not used to that. They're used to shortcuts, like I said, and short text and everything like that. But they understand that it's important. It's just it's very intimidating. So if you can create a safe environment for them to kind of to play around and get used to what it is to speak in front of people and in front of a client, and how to really write something that is succinct and exceptional, and everything like that. You can provide those kind of safe, engaging trainings in a way within your company. Is just taking that extra step. But I can promise you that they do want to be exceptional at what they do. So if there's an area for them to improve upon, they'll take upon it. They're just looking for you, again, as a resource. Okay, how can I do that? Where can I go? So creating that within your own company is a great step.
Thank you, Jessica and Seth. I definitely know a few millennials who are very engaging and who are looking to grow themselves and figure out how to help the company out as best as they can. And like you said, just leave, a name for themselves, kind of thing. Definitely out there. I've seen them, and let's hope that we can all help them to build themselves up as well. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Seth and Jessica. Jessica, do you have a contact email that you'd like to share?
Yes, and I can send that to you, but it's J and then my last name, which is on that first slide. It's a long one, at themagnetgroup.com, but I can get that information over to you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. This webinar has been recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube channel. The link to this will be shared with you tomorrow as an email goes out. So thank you all for attending. Jessica, Seth, again, thank you all so much for joining us and for presenting.
Thank you, Rocio.
Okay, have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.